Hello everyone and welcome to MMA Start to Finish. I'm Julian and this is Matt.
Howdy.
And today we'll be talking about UFC 7, the Brawl in Buffalo, New York, held in the Memorial Auditorium. Attendance of 9,000. Some fun facts about the stadium. It opened in 1940, so this auditorium predates some horrible atrocities that happened.
I mean, that's a great way to start.
I mean, it's just true.
I guess. It was opened on my birthday, so that's neat.
It was demolished during the first year of the Obama administration in 2009. The Buffalo Sabres used to play there. Michael Buffer mistakenly announced the Buffalo Bills played there. This is an indoor facility that seats 9,000 people. A fucking NFL team is not playing there.
Yeah.
Michael Buffer, he makes mistakes. That's what we learned today. Anything else before we get into the start of things here? Oh, I actually have some for us. We have a new commentator and the absence of Jim Brown. Jim Brown is out. No more Jim Brown in his hat and his NFL experience.
He's gone.
Instead, we have Don the Dragon. I'm trying to see here on the Wikipedia page if I can find him. They actually fail to mention here that he's a new commentator. At least that's what I'm seeing here. So Don the Dragon, they mentioned he used to be a professional kickboxer, and he also directed several movies. Some karate movies they mentioned, I forget which ones. I think he directed movies Bruce Lee was in.
Yeah.
And fucking Batman.
Yep.
So cool dude on commentary replacing Jim Brown. Although Jim Brown, you will be missed. Jim Brown's not dead, by the way. He's just super old now.
Yeah.
He's still around. Anything else before we get into the first fight?
Thanks, Obama, for closing down the stadium. The highlights start off with the polar bear Paul Varelans headbutting the camera, so I'm glad they liked that as much as I did. They called this event the House of Dreams and Pain.
They called the UFC the House of Dreams and Pain. That is correct. Very strange nickname for this sport.
Yeah.
But, I can appreciate it.
The alternates this time, instead of having 2 fights for alternates, they went for 3 in case, I guess, some of the alternates get injured.
I will say, however, though, we actually did not need a single alternate tonight.
No,
Tournament holding strong for a change.
People beat each other up for no reason.
Yeah. I'm sure. I hope they get money for the alternate bouts. They better. That's fucked up if they don't get paid.
I feel like they might get like a few hundred or 1,000 at most.
They might make like $1,000.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Money was worth more back then, though. So
it was the 90s.
Yeah.
It was the Clinton administration. The economy was booming, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, off topic. So, a fun fact about this event, or not so fun fact, depending on your perspective. As a lot of people know, for a long time, MMA was illegal in New York. After this event, it was made illegal in New York because of, corruption and local government in New York politics. Eventually, after lobbying and a certain local representative dying off, the sport was made legal, and the UFC 21 years later held their first event in Madison Square Garden in 2017.
Yeah.
That event actually was a good card. It was Conor McGregor was on that card. It was a good time. I remember watching that one.
A good way to bring it back.
Yeah.
We have Jeff Blatnick again as our announcer.
And now color commentator.
Though his intro speech was a little interesting.
Yeah, he stumbled there.
He stumbled a little bit, and he spoke with Harold Howard before the fight.
Oh my goodness.
About what he thought of the event. Harold Howard was quoted as saying, "It's a great rush, eh? It makes your sphincter tight."
Harold Howard, an interesting man who had an interesting fight later on.
Yeah.
That's one way to put it.
A lot of people talking about their parts in these sports.
A lot of people, mentioning potential sexual organs.
Going on from that,
the polar bear, Paul Varelans, he's back, ladies and gentlemen, here to beat up an old man. Gary Harris, 38. He was a security guard.
Not Gary, Jerry Harris.
I'm sorry, Jerry Harris. It's with a G.
Yeah.
I apologize to Jerry, who has no Wikipedia page.
Yeah.
Paul Varelans this time, instead of his street clothes, here in a singlet, looking like a wrestler, even though he has functionally no wrestling experience.
Nope.
I have on my notes, poor Gary. Paul brought him to the ground and just elbowed him in the back of the head. He had 3 opportunities to go for a choke, but like I said, basically no wrestling experience, so did not opt for the choke, instead opted to elbow the old man into submission. He tapped out.
Yeah. The very start of the fight, Paul took Harris to the fence, in which
The door flung open.
The door didn't fly open, but the whole fence shook, which, again, even though it looks better than it did before, still makes me think that this fence could use some improvements.
This fence could absolutely use some improvements.
And I say fence because it is still about the height of a fence.
It's only 5 feet tall still, which I think is a strange decision.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure they raise it to 6 feet, maybe. We'll find out eventually.
Some background on Jerry Harris, though. He is a security guard. That's about all we got.
Yeah, it was a long and a short night for Jerry Harris. The next fight, we have Mark Hall versus Harold Howard. Mark Hall, did you get his discipline? Oh, yeah, he was a karate fighter. He had an interesting karate style. Do you remember it? It was Mu something.
Mark Hall's fighting style of Muay Do.
Very weird. I don't know what that is. Apparently it's a karate style. Whatever it was, worked against Harold Howard here. This fight, Harold Howard, by the way, back without the beard, gets mounted by Mark Hall and quits. And he just quit.
Yeah.
He tapped out. But he didn't tap like a normal human being. He put up the X as if he was a referee in the NFL signaling for an injury. It was very weird. And John was like, "What are you doing, dude?" And then he's like, I quit. And Mark was just, I mean, he got hit. He was bleeding from the mouth. The fight was like mostly uneventful, though. The only note I have is Harold quit.
Yeah. When Harold was trying to, I guess, tap out, he was trying to tap out. He just did it in a very unorthodox manner. He made that sign with his arms a few times and then just started looking over at Big John like, "Help me. Come here."
Yeah, it was a little weird. So, not a lot on that one. Moving on. Remco Pardoel is back from UFC 2. He lost to Royce Gracie in the semifinals. He's here to take on Ryan Parker, who sounds like he's like an attorney at law.
Yeah. He just kind of looks like a...
Like a dude.
Yeah, like a dude.
Like a dude. A headlock takeover, but it was really like a judo throw because Remco's background is judo. He pinned Ryan to the ground and eventually would land a lapel choke, which you don't really see in the UFC anymore because you can't wear a gi in the octagon. He fished one arm behind his head and the other arm pinned up against his throat and just squeezed. That's more of a pain choke than it is like you're going to black out choke. It was pretty gnarly.
The commentators also mentioned to us that the fighter Parker has absolutely no ground experience.
What are you doing here?
That
what is your what? Did they not watch the other UFCs? Did they not understand how this shit goes?
That was our immediate response to hearing that.
A couple of these guys. And Larry Cureton, no background experience on the ground. He's been here before. He should know better. He hasn't fought yet, but we'll get to that fight.
Yeah. So, really shows people are still learning the basics here.
Still a lot of work to do.
But we're getting there. Some people we'll see in this tonight are learning, and they're getting better.
Utilizing some new techniques. Up next. Anything else?
Nope.
Up next, we have the debut of the King of the Streets, Marco Ruas, taking on Larry Thunderfoot Cureton. Larry, not really a very formidable opponent. The fight actually did last for quite a while. Marco's background was Vale Tudo, which, similar to Pancrase, kind of predates MMA, but it was in Brazil. I don't know a lot of the rules about Vale Tudo, but I know it was a precursor to MMA. And a lot of MMA fighters came from that background. For the graphics, they have Marco's age as question marks.
No one knows how old he is.
On Wikipedia, though, I did see, we could do the math here. He is 50... He's 57 years old now, and that was 24 years ago. So he was 23.
All right.
I don't know if that's accurate. Like, how do they know that?
He's a young man.
He was young. He looks old, though.
There's no need.
He looks perpetually like 40.
A little bit.
He looks like... This is only going to be funny for me, but he looks a little bit like my dad, which was kind of weird.
Yeah.
Like, ever so slightly like my dad. There was an early scramble where Marco landed on top, and Larry, with no ground game, basically just ate shit.
Yeah. Marco was on his back for a good while, but he...
I will say Larry did land some body shots on the ground that were kind of gnarly.
Yeah. Like, he had a leg kick going up to Larry's face.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, Marco upkicked Larry from his back. And eventually, Marco tried for a couple different submissions. He went for an armbar that he couldn't really get, and then later on, after a little bit of grappling off of their backs, he grabbed his leg, and on Wikipedia here it says a heel hook. I couldn't tell if it was a heel hook or a knee bar, but it looked like a heel hook. That sounds right.
Makes sense.
It was, again, if we're going to give out our fights of the night, I might give it to this one.
I'm going to disagree with that, but we haven't gotten to it yet.
Okay. So I found this one to be interesting, because even though Larry didn't really have any ground experience, it was still an interesting matchup.
Yeah. Marcos's nickname is King of the Streets, and his last name, Ruas,
yeah.
is Portuguese for streets, so...
A very fitting name.
Yeah. I wonder how he got that nickname, huh?
Up next, we have the first semifinal matchup. Paul Varelans versus Mark Hall. Mark Hall, much smaller than Paul Varelans.
Yeah, there's an 8-inch height difference and 110 pounds of muscle difference.
This is why we have weight classes. This is a problem.
He is a huge man.
Mark started the fight with like a jumping Superman punch that didn't do a lot.
Paul ate his fist.
Yeah, it was, dude, he's just too big. Like, this is not fair. Paul would eventually take him down. And actually, I said he didn't have any wrestling experience, but showcased a little bit of versatility, landing a key lock.
Not even eventually. He just took him down.
Yeah, it didn't last that long.
This was a minute of fighting.
Yeah. I should say, this one did not go as long. Most of these fights were within the 1 to 3 minute range so far.
Paul pretty much had total domination in this fight.
Yeah, I don't think Mark's bad. I just think I'd like to see him fight somebody his own size.
Yeah.
Mark Hall and Ryan Parker perhaps would have been interesting.
Someone who isn't like 33% bigger than him.
It's just absurd. Like, what are you doing?
We need weight classes.
By the way, we should mention, we haven't mentioned this yet, but much like UFC 6, there's a tournament and there's the super fight. The super fight tonight was the winner of the last one, Ken and Dan facing off. Mm-hmm. Ken versus Oleg Taktarov.
Yeah.
Who won the tournament in UFC 6. We'll get to that fight. We'll get there. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah.
Up next, we have the second semifinal matchup. Remco Pardoel taking on the King of the Streets, Marco Ruas. Remco and Marcos, this fight lasted for a while. They wound up in a stalemate up against the cage for quite some time, where Marcos decided to showcase a new strategy, foot stomps.
So many dancing feet.
Very effective. You can just imagine your heel down on somebody's toes, breaking their toes.
Yeah.
That would fucking suck.
It's not a great thing to happen to you.
Not a really graceful way to put that. That would fucking blow. Yeah. Eventually, things did go to the ground, and Ruas landed on top. And we would see another leg lock exchange, this one lasting a little longer. And with Remco's experience, this one, it took a while. He didn't land a leg lock. I should clarify. The fight did not end on a leg lock. We'll get to the weird ending in a minute, but he threatened another heel hook.
Yeah. Remco had Marcos in a leg lock for a little bit, but Marcos got out. There was a smash cut to an old man watching. Then we had it go back to Marcos going for a leg lock, and Remco smartly defending it. He knows how to grapple.
Intelligently defending.
Yeah, he knows what he's doing. He knows how to stop this from happening.
So the end of this fight was weird. Eventually, Marcos obtained mount, and as soon as he obtained mount, Remco just tapped.
Yeah.
On here it says submission by position, which I think is accurate.
Yeah.
It was very weird.
I think Remco knew that the position that Marco was in was he was kind of sitting on Remco's chest, and
he was going to beat the shit out of him.
Yeah.
He's got mount.
He's got these pythons on his arms, so he's going to
as you can see here in the photo, Marcos, a sculpted man.
Yeah. Well, if you're on YouTube.
Yeah, it's true. If you're on SoundCloud, there's no photo for you. I'm sorry. Up next, we have the super fight. I use that term very loosely. Ken Shamrock versus Oleg Taktarov. And I will summarize the fight for you very briefly. Shamrock takes Oleg down and lays in his guard.
Yeah.
For a half hour.
Yeah.
This was another Ken Shamrock Royce Gracie matchup. Starting to think Ken might be part of the problem.
Yeah.
Has no clue how to advance past a guard.
Yeah.
Dude, what are you doing? Look, you're a grappler. You should know this by now. You'd think, I'm like frustrated because I know Ken's a good fighter, but every time we see him now, it's just this shit.
Yeah, I haven't seen him fight in anything else yet personally, but from what I'm hearing and from what I've just seen of Ken. Seems like he gets very cautious when he's in the octagon.
Here's how long this fight was just on the ground. We went downstairs and made coffee and came back and nothing had changed.
Yeah.
It was a fucking stalemate.
It was more active than the Royce Gracie fight.
Marginally. That's a low bar.
Because they were occasionally throwing punches, some of which had some power to them.
And John did stand them up a couple times, but right back to the ground they went.
Yeah.
That ended in a draw, just like the Gracie Shamrock fight.
Also, there's a commentation from Don the Dragon in the middle of this when nothing was happening. that goes to show you that gloves are important. He was talking about how he's sparred before, and with gloves on.
In kickboxing fights too, he's a professional kickboxer.
Yeah, he's broken his hands 10 times while punching people.
It's easy to break your hands, man. These things are not good for hitting people, like we said before.
And most people in here don't have gloves.
Yeah, it was only Tank Abbott, and nobody picked up on his lead and put on gloves for this event.
Nope.
And no Tank Abbott tonight either, which was interesting.
There was one other guy that had MMA gloves.
Yeah, but he
didn't stick around.
Yeah, he had no grappling background and got choked out.
Yep.
Yeah.
Big John stood them up around the 20-minute mark, and
the 27-minute mark.
They went back down. They got up, and then they went back down. Once they got up again, Ken Shamrock tried to start doing some kicks, but John quickly put an end to that because Ken had shoes on.
That's right. Yeah, Ken tried some leg kicks, and John scolded him like a child who was just taking some cookies he shouldn't be having. Yeah, the rules at the time were you could wear shoes, but you couldn't kick.
Yeah.
So Ken corrected.
UFC, there are no rules except for some rules.
Except for like 3 or 4 that like apply sometimes. Anything else on this one?
Once they got into overtime, they started actually fighting again, but then
they're both so gassed at that point. It was after half an hour.
Nothing really happened, and it went back. I think it went back to the ground.
It did go back to the ground.
Yeah,
at the end, yeah.
And it went into a draw.
We skimmed through this one a little bit too, because Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, moving on to the final fight of the night, the tournament finals bout. Marco Ruas versus Paul Varelans. I will say there was a little bit of stalling in this one, but not nearly on the level of the fight we just saw.
Nothing at all like the last one.
Marco coming out with a very interesting strategy. Leg kicks, trying to chop down Paul Varelans. Throughout this 13-minute fight, a lot of leg kicks.
You made a good joke while we were watching it. Before the axe murder, there was Marco Ruas.
Yeah. Marco Ruas, too, threw some hands in there. Not nearly as consistent as his kicks. His punches look pretty good. I mean, I imagine it's, that big dome of Paul Varelans kind of hurts landing on.
Yeah.
At one point, Paul Varelans picked up Marco Ruas in a front headlock. It looked like it might have been a guillotine, but he didn't have the arms positioned properly, so it just looks really crazy, but nothing really came out of that. And while they were up against the cage during that stalemate, Marco again implementing the foot stomps, just fucking with Paul Varelans.
Yeah, Paul was not happy about those foot stomps.
I imagine after these leg kicks and these foot stomps, Paul couldn't walk well for a few days.
Yeah, he was at least in crutches, with that one leg being so beat to hell.
The one leg at the end of this fight was severely bruised. Varelans, by the way, eventually figured out how to check the kicks. Now, I don't know if he trained leg kicks, because we hadn't seen leg kicks in the UFC to this point. But the way you check a leg kick, obviously, is you lift your leg up so the shin lands on shin. It hurts both of you, and it doesn't beat up your thigh. But he couldn't check every kick, and he was gassed eventually. And Marcos chopped him down like a redwood tree, and once he was down on the ground, finished him with punches.
Yeah.
And became the UFC tournament champion.
Paul was in love with the fence, though.
Yeah, during that stalemate exchange, Paul didn't just grab the fence. He had one hand inside the cage, another draped over the top and grabbing the cage from the outside. It was so dumb. You see here why eventually they'd make cage grabbing illegal, because it just leads to stalemates. It's ridiculous. It doesn't advance the action in any meaningful way.
John McCarthy eventually did have to separate them from the fence because Paul was just he had it too well.
It was stalling. Not a lot was going on, and after the Ken Oleg fight, I imagine John was a little sensitive to stalling, so he's going to separate them a little sooner than he would ordinarily.
Yeah.
It only makes sense.
And this is the fight that I would call the fight of the night.
You call this one the fight of the night?
Because
I think that's fair.
Because it was the most interesting technically.
That is definitely fair. I found, I don't know, I guess because of the brevity of Marco Ruas, Larry Cureton, I prefer it, but this fight in isolation is probably a better fight.
Yeah.
Especially with the strategy Marcos employed to take out the much larger man, Paul Varelans.
Yeah, Paul just collapsed at one point.
Eventually, your leg's just not going to support that shit anymore,
Yeah.
you know? Your bones, your muscles, rather, just give out on you. Up next, we have the Ultimate 95, which is listed on Fight Pass as UFC 7.5. So I guess this was the first event they did that wasn't numerically sequenced. So that's going to be interesting.
I'm curious to see if... right now, we've only got it to 1995, so we can't see 96's fights. I'm interested to see if they continue this, because I can't imagine that they'll be, like, announcing, this is UFC 7.5. No, they're just going to call it Ultimate.
Yeah,
95.
I think this is, like, post-mortem labeled UFC 7.5. I don't think they called it that at the time.
I guess so.
I
see Dan Severn.
Yeah, we see Dan Severn, and it looks like Oleg Taktarov squaring off.
Yeah.
They don't have a poster for us.
Weird.
Which is interesting. But that's for next time. Until then, thank you for listening. If you're listening on YouTube, please like the video. If you're listening on SoundCloud, hit the heart button. Until then, thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Adios.